I'm Jim Gordon, and it's my pleasure to be back here in the studio at the Richmond Sentinel office here in Richmond. I'm back again this year to host a special segment on the upcoming federal election. The city of Richmond is divided into two ridings, Richmond Centre and the Steveston-Richmond East, resulting in sending two members of Parliament to Ottawa. Now, we have invited all 10 candidates and offer this as a platform, as a stage, to let you see and hear these candidates, who they are and why they want to go to Ottawa as a member of Parliament. Every candidate that accepted our invitation will be given the same questions: why they're running and what they see as the most important issues facing the residents of Richmond. Let's get right to this new federal election and the candidates right here at the Richmond Sentinel. Well, our first guest, he is rerunning, is Kenny Chiu. He represents the Conservative Party in Steveston-Richmond East riding. Kenny, before we get to that, we want to make an announcement. I should have mentioned it right off the bat, though, that everybody has been wearing masks. We have taken them off just for the interview. We are doing our best to stay as far apart, but just so you know, masks are being worn by our crew behind the cameras. We'll put ours back on as soon as the interviews are over. Okay, Kenny, you're up first. Let's talk a bit about who you are. That's your first question, and we'll go from there.
Jim, I'm Kenny Chiu. I've been a Richmond resident for decades. I first moved from Saskatoon to Richmond in 1992. This is where my family is rooted. My two girls went to McRoberts. The younger one has just graduated from McRoberts last year during pandemic, but they are both in university. My wife and I both work in Richmond. I love the city. I love its vibrance and active and diversity in our city here. So this is where my home is, and I want to continue to serve it.
I guess with my second question, as we mentioned off the top, everyone will be getting the same three questions. With you, it's a bit of a switch on that because you're rerunning. You're the current MP. Talk a bit about the job that you know you have to do because you have been there and you're rerunning, and why you want to continue doing this job.
Well, Jim, yes, I do, but no, I don't. Because 2 months after I sworn in as the Member of Parliament for Steveston-Richmond East, there's this announcement in World Health Organization called COVID pandemic.
Yes.
And the world has never been the same ever. And so how is it to be an MP in the normal days?
You don't know.
I don't know.
You don't, okay.
I don't know. But on the other hand, though, I find it a privilege to be able to represent the good people of Steveston-Richmond East during this, historical moment in our country's history. We have never encountered such a pandemic in that same scale, with impacts on our healthcare, people's lives, our economy, ever. And having a seat in the House of Commons, arguing and advocating for Richmond, it's such a privilege. And yet, on the other hand, though, it's also a burden that I've been taking on. That not being in the government side, sometimes it's difficult to implement some of the ideas and changes that is much needed and beneficial to Richmondites here in my riding.
Let's talk a bit about what you feel is most important. I mean, you really pegged it with COVID. That really has taken up most of the space and the focus and the concentration, as it should. And we certainly can't say that we're seeing a light yet, cynical as that may sound. But let's talk a bit about issues. Issues still have to be dealt with no matter what is happening. What have you been looking at, and what do you feel is the most urgent and needs attention from government?
I think during this pandemic, it exposed our country to polarization of opinion, even on the effectiveness of masking.
Certainly, yeah.
Vaccination. By the way, I have received 2 shots of the same vaccines. I encourage any Richmondites who are still not vaccinated to seek vaccination as much as possible. We believe in the evidence that we have received, the science that presented to us, and the data that have shown to policymakers that it is the best, most effective tools for Canada to be in a recovery mode, and it relies on each citizen to do our part. So on that, I've gone door knocking, and there have been a lot of citizens who are still hesitant.
Sure.
Some of them are in fear. They're not comfortable. And conservatives believe that Canadians do enjoy our universal health care. We enjoy our safety. We enjoy our health status in the world. Over 70% of our citizens have been vaccinated. But at the same time, we are not the country that would drag people to a clinic and get vaccinated. So, how do we as a government, Aaron O'Toole Conservatives, how do we articulate this? We urge everybody. We want to encourage and recommend vaccination as the most effective one, and at the same time, respecting people's final choice on how they will receive vaccination. It's also another dynamics, during this election. And then there's also hates and misinformation, discrimination. We know that throughout this pandemic, a lot of the citizens have actually gone through and encountered that level of hate.
Yeah, certainly.
In fact, I personally am seeing something similar right now being circulated in some of the social media, attacking me as anti-Chinese, myself, and my party as anti-China. Everybody knows that that's farthest from the truth. Ever since the very first member of parliament of Chinese descent, Doug Jiang, had become a conservative MP in Vancouver Centre, this party has been paying attention and be fighting for equality and counter the kind of level of discrimination that we are seeing. But it's disheartening as well to see that there are opportunists trying to take advantage of the COVID-19 pandemic situations. Many people are isolated, and even in the sense of information-wise, they're isolated, and therefore some people are taking a full advantage of that. Certainly. For their political gains. So there are these issues that, as the Member of Parliament, I want to do more to encourage everybody to be kind, to appreciate what Canada has as an opportunity. As a Conservative MP, I'm also very concerned about where this country is heading. Jim, we have conducted this interview for maybe a few minutes now, but every second of those minutes, every second, the country has overspent so much that every second we borrow $50,000. That's how much Canada has overspent. Right. And these monies, $424 million per day and 154 billions for the year, have to be accounted for, have to be paid for sometimes. Right now we are running on our grandkids' credit cards. It's not fair, it's not right. So how do we recover from that? Aaron O'Toole Conservative, we have a proposal how we can actually present to Canadians a plan of recovery for Canada in our economic situations, in our mental health care, in our jobs recovery, how to support Canada so that the next pandemic hit us, we would not be found that our cupboards are empty again. So all these ideas we're presenting to Canadians as a positive message to lead Canada out of a COVID-19 pandemic situation.
It's Kenny Chiu. Thank you for joining us today, Kenny. I know schedules are busy right now as we get closer to the election. Kenny is the current Conservative MP for Steveston, Richmond East. He's rerunning. He's our first guest. Kenny Chiu, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jim.
Well, joining us now is Parm Bains. He is the Liberal representative running for MP in the Steveston, Richmond East riding. Parm, welcome.
Thank you.
As we're doing with everybody, Parm, we're asking three questions, all the same. First one for you is, let's tell our viewers a bit about yourself, and we'll go from there.
Well, my name's Parm Bains. I'm a lifelong Richmond resident. Grew up in the Shelmont area my whole life. I teach in Richmond. I'm a university lecturer now at Kwantlen Polytechnic University. I have 15 years of public policy experience with the BC government, and that's where I gained a lot of my knowledge in the public policy area. As a public relations officer, I had the opportunity to work with a lot of organizations, and I also serve on the Richmond Community Foundation board as the vice chair. And there is recently, with the pandemic and the virus and the spread of the virus, we had the opportunity with the foundation to work with organizations and distribute money to them, and a tremendous amount of work is being done within Richmond by these organizations. But I did see a lot of gaps, and the necessary support that is needed to provide community residents with the certain services. There are gaps there, and that ultimately was a lot of my work that I did with the public service as well, is fostering relationships between organizations, community, and making sure we can tackle emerging issues and put people in touch with the services they need. So that's a lot of work that I've done in the past, and I think for me, I've been a strong advocate for issues around housing and affordability. I see it in the classroom. I see students with anxiety levels that are high because not knowing what's in store for the future.
Sure.
And those are some of the key reasons that I've come forward, and I think I have some good ideas I'd like to put forward and present, and what better place to do that than being in Parliament and having the ability to make those necessary changes and improvements in the way we do things for our residents.
Yeah, you talked about your experience and your background and seeing things on the front line and getting a view of what maybe is not there and what's needed. Let's move into that then. You're seeing that. Talk a bit about what you feel is most important and most in need of attention in your riding and in Richmond in general.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, affordability is a big one, right? Housing, and I'm excited about the Liberal platform because one of the key platform items that we've introduced is housing for everyone. And if we look back at some of the ideas I've talked about previously within our municipality with gentle density and other things, there's a missing middle, a number of options that aren't available to people, young professionals, people starting a family. So that's a big one for us here. I see it at the doorstep as well, or hear it at the doorstep. Another one is when I talk to my students in the classroom, anxiety levels, and this is something I saw when I was doing my work with the Richmond Community Foundation, mental health. Timely mental health support is not there. So when I say timely, you're looking at support workers not maybe being matched up with somebody in a timely manner. You might get one support worker at this one time.
Yeah.
You'd have to wait 2 months and get somebody totally different, and you're
no history there, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's no history, and how are you really improving your mental health? And students and young people, they are open to share, but not all are, right? So I think there's a lot of support that's needed there. They are our future leaders. And I think that if we can provide them the necessary support, we'll all be better off as we move forward together.
He's Parm Bains. He's running Liberal candidate in the Steveston Richmond East riding. Parm, we know it's a busy time from all of you guys right now, so we appreciate you taking the time to come in and talk to us here at the Richmond Sentinel.
Thank you very much for this opportunity.
You're quite welcome. Our next candidate to join us now is Jack Trovato. He is the representative for the NDP in the Steveston Richmond East riding. Jack, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're quite welcome, sir. Okay, let's jump right in. Same questions for everybody as we've been announcing. Let's start with an introduction for our viewers as to who you are.
Sure. My name is Jack Trovato, and I'm very proud to be representing the NDP here for Steveston Richmond East. I'm a teacher.
Okay.
And I'm also a community advocate. And some of you, your viewers may know some of the work that I've done over recent years. So one of the things that I did was spearhead the petition calling for the restriction of house size on the agricultural land reserve.
Okay.
So that's one of the major issues that was very important to our community a few years back. I also launched a petition calling for adequate funding for the replacement of the acute care tower at Richmond Hospital. And that was motivated, I have to tell you,
Sure.
from taking my father to emergency a few years ago. He was 85 years old, and we waited for 12 hours.
Wow.
And I thought, we need to do better. So that was the impetus to start that petition. And luckily, the provincial government recently announced that the funding is going forward, and there is now a commitment to shovels in the ground, and that's going to be built for the betterment of our entire community. And then the last thing that I petitioned for was calling on the provincial government to launch a public inquiry into money laundering, drug trafficking, and profiteering in our real estate economy. Huge implications, not only for our city here in Richmond,
Sure.
but also provincially and also nationally. So I'm committed to advocating on behalf of the constituents of Steveston, Richmond East for a better, fairer, greener, and more, shall we say, more just society.
Certainly.
That looks towards taking care of working Canadians, and that is based on a hopeful vision for a better tomorrow. And I plan on doing that by challenging the status quo, because clearly it hasn't been working for a very long time. So challenging the status quo on our social, economic, and political policies, and by enacting new ones that serve the common good of all Canadians. And the NDP and Jagmeet Singh, over the last 18 months during the height of the pandemic, have done a wonderful job in terms of advocating on behalf of all Canadians. And I'll be very happy to work alongside Jagmeet Singh and the NDP so that we can invest in things like healthcare, affordable housing, taking the profit out of long-term care,
Right.
and creating green infrastructure, while at the same time creating good jobs for Canadians that will address the climate change and the climate crisis that we're in right now. I do believe that together we can ensure that there's a just transition as we recover from the pandemic.
Talking a bit about yourself and some of the things you've spearheaded kind of leads me into another question, which, although you've mentioned a number of items that do need attention,
Yes.
Can you talk about other things in Richmond that you feel the MP representing your riding must attend to, and the party they represent must attend to?
Right. Affordability, especially affordable housing. There is a lack of rental, non-market, and co-op housing. In fact, the last co-op in Richmond was built about 30 years ago.
Wow.
So, we've been complaining about affordability for a very, very long time. It's not a new phenomenon.
Right.
And it affects my family as well. My daughter got married 2 years ago to a lovely gentleman from New Zealand.
Yeah.
I don't understand what he says to me half the time, but he's lovely nonetheless.
Yeah.
And, I have to tell you that they also had that critical decision of, what do we do, Dad? Do we stay here in Canada where she was born and raised?
Right.
Or do they move to New Zealand where they could actually afford to buy a house? It was a very difficult decision.
Sure.
They chose to move to New Zealand. And I can tell you that they bought a house, a modest house, but a house nonetheless that a family could grow into.
Certainly.
For $350,000. What on earth can you buy here for $350,000?
Not much.
If anything at
If
all.
anything, yeah.
So affordability is something that is critical, I think, to the residents of Richmond, but also Metro Vancouver and right across the country. So Jagmeet Singh and the NDP have committed to creating 500,000 affordable housing units across the country, with half of them being built within about 5 years. In the meantime, because it's going to take time,
Certainly.
what do we do in terms of offering assistance to those people that are struggling to rent? So Jagmeet, his plan is to offer a $5,000 subsidy, yearly subsidy, to those low-income renters until there's enough of a supply built that we can then transition those folks into affordable housing units.
Hey, this is great stuff. I thank you, and we're thanking everybody for taking the time today. I know it's getting down to the wire. Season's getting busy, so we appreciate you coming in. It's Jack Trovato. He's the representative running for the NDP in Steveston, Richmond East riding. Jack, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Our next candidate in the Steveston, Richmond East riding is Francois Rounet. And you're with the Green Party. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, I am. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're quite welcome. We are asking the same three questions of everybody today, just to get the viewers insight as to who you are. Let's start with some background on yourself, an introduction, and we'll take the questions after that.
Okay, sure, no problem. Well, my name, as you mentioned, my name is Françoise Rounet, or Francoise Rounet. 如果你说中文，大家好，我叫方思华。I grew up in Vancouver. I was lucky enough to have a very politically active household as a child. So I attended a lot of protest rallies and a lot of, other kind of advocacy events in my childhood. And the thing that I find really frustrating is that, the things that my parents were taking me out protesting for in the 80s are the same issues that we're dealing with today. And I'm just so frustrated after 40 years of advocating for, first it was peace, right? Peace march, anti-war stuff. It was solidarity marches and workers' rights and human rights. And then in my first anti-fossil fuel protest was in 1989.
89.
And, it just gets increasingly frustrating to feel like, we're not making any progress on the things that matter the most to me and to my family. I'm a teacher, I'm a mom. I care passionately about the future that we're leaving to the next generation. And really that's what pushed me to get into politics, was just that feeling of like government is not doing what needs to be done. I don't actually care what party implements the policies, as long as the policies get implemented. Right? We need to deal with very complicated issues, and unfortunately our current elected leaders aren't doing it. And so for me, running in Steveston, Richmond East, this time around I'm actually running a nil expenses campaign, which means that I won't be spending any money at all on lawn signs or anything like that. So if you see my signs out in the community, you'll see that they're recycled from the last election when I ran in Richmond Centre in 2019. And the reason for that is because I just really want to make sure that the voters have an option on the ballot, right? I think that especially in a riding like Richmond East that tends to swing between conservative and liberal and conservative and liberal, and we've seen the same two parties representing the riding for the past few decades. I think that voters really need to have a choice to vote for a very clear set of policies and a different kind of direction for our global economy. Because the fact is, our economy is fundamentally flawed. And I can talk about it a bit more.
It's your time, please. Please do.
Basically, what it comes down to me is that the whole economy and this premise that it's based on GDP growth and consumption and always increasing the amount of growth and increasing profit, and it basically is consuming the resources of the planet far too quickly. At a completely unsustainable rate for the benefit of a very, very, very few people. And the people who are benefiting has actually shrunk since the 1970s and 80s. Like, I remember when I was a kid growing up, there were a lot of jobs in resources in BC. There were a lot of jobs in the resource sector. And unfortunately, government decisions over the last few decades have led to a lot more, jobs being exported offshore. We're not doing any value-added manufacturing of our forestry products anymore. We're cutting down raw logs and sending them to China to be milled and then buying them back, for example. Right? We need to rethink our economy, and we need to keep our money local as much as possible. And we need government to stop working for the biggest industries on the planet, the billionaires and the millionaires and the multi-millionaires that are out there, and really start putting that money back into our local communities. So I am running to give people an option so that when they go to the ballot box, they know that if they put a tick beside my name, they're going to be telling whoever it is that wins Richmond East Steveston that they are voting for environmental protection. They are voting for a new local economy where the focus is on keeping the wealth in our local communities and not sending it to boardrooms overseas. And also for housing. That's another huge issue for me. I live in a co-op. I'm very, very lucky. I grew up in a co-op too. And we just don't have enough of it. You know, government stopped funding public housing and co-ops and social housing in the 90s, and in the last decade we've had a bit of a reinvestment, but it needs to be scaled up like 10 times, right? The number of people in our communities that can't pay rent, you know, that people are moving further and further away. The people I went to high school with, I think probably, you know, less than a quarter of them are still living in the greater Vancouver area. Most of them have moved to either other parts of Canada, other parts of BC, and even other countries.
Right.
So we have a lot of really serious and really urgent needs. And unfortunately, what we see from our politicians is a lot of finger pointing. And they all, in the campaign period, they'll all stand here and I'm sure they'll say, I believe in housing. I believe in funding a good healthcare system. I believe, you know, of course they do. We all do. These are our values. And yet we never make progress on them. Despite the fact that we all supposedly have the same stated goal, we never make progress. And why not? Because they're too busy picking at each other's flaws and not working together to get the job done. And that's what I want to do. I think if I go to Ottawa, I will be the force that will bring everybody together like I do in the classroom.
Well, I tell you what, you have answered all your questions, which is admirable.
Well, all right.
You've told us in the few seconds we have left, I mean, as I said, our last question, of course, is the issues that are most important to you, specifically about Richmond and your riding, but you have answered those as well. If there's any last words you have, the floor is yours still.
I don't know if everybody is aware, but there is an LNG plant on Tilbury Island in the south arm of the Fraser River. That is currently seeking an expansion. So that would be a huge increase of freighter traffic. It would be an added risk of explosion and pollution and everything for the people in our riding. So I think that's something definitely that's on the radar, that whoever does wind up representing Richmond East when they go to Ottawa, this is something they're going to have to deal with because that petition is before the federal government right now. So I encourage all elected leaders to work for the people and not for multinational corporations.
Thank you very much. She is the Green Party candidate for Steveston Richmond East. It's Francois Rounet. I hope I'm doing well with your last name. Was that?
Rounet is good.
Rounet,
yes, it's Francois. Yeah.
Okay, Francois.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. Nice to meet you.
Well, we're taking a little break from the Q&A with the potential candidates for those positions in Ottawa. I've got a guy here. I always like to have him on when we do these sessions because he knows Richmond. He's been a part of Richmond since moving here in 1971. He's been a councillor since 1993. Bill McNulty, always great to have you with us, Bill.
Jim, thanks for having me here, and I'm very pleased to be with you as part of your show.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. I always like to get your feedback on what we're doing. Last time we were here, it was for the provincial election. Now we're here for the federal election. Some basic questions I want to talk to you, because you know the lay of the land and you know what it's like to be a councillor and representing the people. Let's talk a bit about what it takes to be an MP and a successful one.
Well, first of all, to be anybody in the public sector and in terms of the political side, you've got to like people and you want to be able to work for people. But also when you come into the idea of politics, you have got to have a goal.
Goals, yes.
Like, why are you here? What do you want to do? You can look at the cherry on the cake or the candle on the cake, but you don't know what's in the base of the cake and what it's all about. And many people think sometimes standing for office, and I respect everybody who puts their name on that ballot, it isn't what it appears to be.
Yeah.
There is a lot more behind the scenes than goes with sitting there saying yes if the party leader tells you to, or voting your own conscience, and everybody else is against you or for you.
Yeah,
you don't
sure.
know. So it's extremely important along that line. And along with that goal, you have to look at, am I passionate enough about it to achieve it and to continue to work? And that to me is very important when one steps into that ring.
Yeah, it's interesting because in your history and what you've done, your work is around this city. For our viewers that may not know of some of the accomplishments, the goals that you set out that you accomplished. Let our viewers know a little bit about that. I think that's important.
Well, when I moved here back in 1971, my goal was to improve facilities for sport within the community. And we had a council and councils of the day fighting against us all the way through. So I helped establish, it was my idea to form a sports council and to continue to try to get the Garden City lands, which 30 years later we were able to get. But if you look at the Richmond News and Review of 1971, I'm lone pitcher, head and shoulder shot. McNulty wants the Garden City lands for sport.
Right.
Headlines.
Yeah.
I came in to saying that in 1993, headlines in the Richmond Review, councillor says swimming pool will be built by private developer. Watermania was built by a private developer 5 years later.
Right.
I fought for ice rinks, 8 rinks, a $20 million artificial turf program, a library. So just to name a few of the things over the years. So I had a goal, and I still have those goals. Before I'm finished, I want to finish this Stevenson Community Center, the Lawn Bowls Club, the soccer clubhouse, and any other facilities that we might need.
Let's talk about what this city needs right now. You've mentioned a few of the goals that you want to accomplish before you leave. As I said, you've been in this city 50 years this year. What are some of the main things that the candidates really need to focus on, in your opinion?
Well, I think they need to focus, one is getting our vision to Ottawa, in this case. We can use some help in the provincial government and forget politics. The North Tower of the hospital. Sure. We fought for that. I brought that up with a CBC interview in 2012, and it carried along, and we emailed Horgan with 2,500 signatures. The Massey Tunnel, we're hoping the federal government will contribute to, in some small way, to transportation. They've already talked about infrastructure out in Langley, but we got to get to Langley first. So those are right off the top, two huge things. And one of the things I think it's important, and that is communication and taking our thoughts back there and actually fighting for those things in there. You know, remember when we talk about the hundreds of seats across the country, the members of parliament from Newfoundland are arguing for the same as the members of parliament from Victoria. And there's only one pot, and people forget that. There's one taxpayer, you and me. We pay at all three levels. Right. And that is very important, and that you can't forget that. And I think if you do, you shouldn't be there.
Well, the last question for you is something you brought up before we went on the air, and that's the relationship between the councillors, your position, and the MPs, the people that are running, that there has to be a communication. You're known for reaching out to MPs saying, hey, can you come over here? I need help with this. Talk a bit before we wrap things up about how important that is and why that should never be ignored.
Well, I think too often it's forgotten at the other levels of government because they have to toe the party line. The one thing and we've always said this as council members and at the municipal level, we are the closest to the people. We are with the grassroots people. They phone me all the time because they know something will be done if the garbage wasn't picked up today and or there's a pothole or a water main break in front of your house. And they communicate with us and we communicate with them. But more importantly too is we need to have more interaction at the provincial and federal levels. And I think that's probably lacking all across this country. And I think it's something that if a good MP and a good MLA will continue that. Just before coming here with you, I sat down with a newly elected MLA, and sure, we rehashed some things, etc. But we established that we're on the same team, trying for the same things for our families and doing the best we can for the people of Richmond. And you've got to want to make a difference with the goals that you set.
That's a great way to end things, Bill. I want to thank you as always for your insight. It's Bill McNulty, councillor here in Richmond since 1993 and a resident of this city for 50 years. Bill, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, sir. Well, we go from the Steveston-Richmond East riding to Richmond Centre riding, and starting off this area is the current representative from that riding. It's Conservative MP Alice Wong, who is running for re-election, of course. Alice, welcome.
Thank you very much, Tim.
Okay, we're asking everybody the same three questions. Let's start with a little background and introduction to our readers and our viewers on who you are.
I'm Alice Wong. I've been Member of Parliament since 2008. You know, at that time it was called Richmond and now Richmond Centre. So for the past 12 years, have been very privileged to be able to serve this riding. And during my time in the Parliament, I have had the privilege of serving under Prime Minister Stephen Harper, and in 2008, and then in 2011. And I was then appointed to be the minister responsible for seniors, the Minister of State for Seniors. And after that, in 2015, of course, the Conservative was defeated, and then the Liberal government. So then we were in opposition. So I've been serving as an opposition member since then. And then, of course, I was re-elected in 2019, and now I'm asking the voters to send me back to Ottawa for the 5th time. So during this time, I've been working hard not only to bring more funding to the Richmond Centre, and also looking after the needs of our constituents. Like a lot of them have challenges regarding visa application, OH security, and other federal related programs. So I'm very proud to say that my office has been working very effectively. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank my frontline staffers. So here I am asking the voters again to send me back to Ottawa. Now, this is an election that should not really be happening at all, because this is during pandemic time. And so I have been taking extra precaution, even in my own campaign office. So everybody who comes in needs to be vaccinated, and then we even have a rapid testing kit ready for anyone who hasn't had a shot. So here I am asking you for the 5th time to send me back to Ottawa.
And Alice, you obviously know the lay of the land, because you, as you mentioned, have been there since 2008. Were you to return to Ottawa? Talk a bit about work that you still want to see completed. You talk about your riding and more funding for things. Let's talk a bit about what you feel is most important and in most need of attention in Richmond Centre.
Well, okay, I've been door knocking ever since. Even before the writ drops, I was listening to a lot of my voters, because I sent them newsletters and they wrote me back. And what I've been hearing is people are very much concerned about the economic recovery. Pandemic has put a lot of people out of work. So my major, purpose going back is to make sure that jobs will be created. I have parents talking to me saying that their kids graduated and they don't have a job, and also graduates telling me, Auntie Alice, I can't find a job. What can I do? So this is number one. I wanted to make sure that jobs are there too for them. Of course, the second one will be our healthcare. Because of the pandemic, and we wanted to make sure that funding is there. So once the Conservative get back to government, we will increase the transfer to provinces from 3% to 6% increase every year. And also mental wellness is very important. We have a lot of people who, because of pandemic, they either die in loneliness or die of loneliness. Mm-hmm. So this is something close to my heart. Another thing I like to work is to work for the carers, caring for the carers, because we had a lot of people who've been doing a lot of work for their own parents, their own kids, and looking even after their own parents and grandparents. So we wanted to make sure that employers will understand why these very productive employees do not want a promotion. There's a great loss of productivity, and a lot of them are women. And I had the privilege of serving in the Women's Committee, so I heard loud and clear why they really wanted support for them. So those will be a few things I will be looking at. Of course, security, because we all heard about the YVR shooting. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to make sure that guns are controlled, and then also at the same time, we will really stop guns from smuggling across the borders. So because illegal people who committed gun crimes do not use legally purchased guns. So, and also gang activities. I will look very carefully at the cause of why young people get themselves involved in gang activities. So let's go back to the root, mm-hmm. so that they will be we will be able to look at how we can support these young people and get them off the gangs. So these will be some of the things I would like to do once I get re-elected.
She is Alice Wong, running for re-election, as she mentioned, in Richmond Centre for the Conservative Party. Alice, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Well, our next candidate in the Richmond Centre riding is the representative from the Liberal Party, Wilson Miao. Wilson, thanks for joining us.
Hello, Jim. Thanks for having me.
You're quite welcome. Okay, as we've been mentioning, same three questions for everybody. Let's start with a little bit of a background for our viewers on you.
Sure. So my name is Wilson Miao. I actually moved here to Canada when I was 10 with my family. And ever since then, I've been living in Richmond for the past 25 years. So I studied my elementary here at Ferris Elementary and at Richmond Secondary High School before I moved forward to Simon Fraser University.
Let's talk a bit about why you are running for MP to represent Richmond Centre.
Well, I feel after living here for so long, and I noticed our community has been growing quite a lot ever since I moved here. And throughout my growth, I noticed a change that happened to Richmond. And I feel there's much more we can do to make a better improvement for our community. And that is one reason why I want to come out and represent the people in my riding to speak out for them and bring the voice to Ottawa. And at the same time, I feel like the reason why I picked Liberal, along with all the parties option out there, is because over the time that I lived in Canada, I see the Liberal Party doing a lot more for all Canadians. And at the same time, I really like the way how Pierre Trudeau have came out with the Charter of Rights and Freedoms to protect all Canadians, including myself being part of that. So I feel that is something that I would uphold, and I would want to share this message to all Canadians, say we have a responsibility to make a change in our country, and that's why I'm putting myself up to run for this office.
Let's talk a bit, as we were asking everybody today, about what you feel is the most important issue or issues in Richmond Centre, but also Richmond as a whole, as a city. As you mentioned, it's an always growing city. COVID, of course, has taken up a lot of time, rightly so, but what are you seeing out there that's important to you that you think needs attention right now in your riding and your city?
There's a few issues that I feel that it's more important to our riding. One being our safety of the community. In the past 18 months, it's sad to see that we are experiencing one of the first pandemic that affect the whole world. And a lot of people I know, and I know a lot of people in this communities got affected by that. At the same time, I know there's a lot of information that's being disinformed by many platforms that we need to identify them to make sure the right message is shared across the community so that people won't be feel fear or isolated during the pandemic. And especially with the gun crime and racist crime that's happening right now, this is completely against the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We should be engaging as a community and feel united as a whole so that we can bring a stronger and safer community to everyone. And the other issue that I really advocate for is our climate change. Because being one of the younger candidates in this election, I know this issue is real. And throughout the past 5-10 years, I noticed a huge change to our environment, especially with all the wildfires that's happening to BC interior in the past few summers. And it's getting worse and worse. And if we don't address this, then this is not going to be fair to our next generation and the generation to come. So I feel it's important for us to identify the real issue of climate change and really address it and work towards it, like what the Liberal government is bringing in their platform. And last but not least, I feel our seniors and youth in our community really needs the attention, not just because they have done what they have done to our community, but at the same time we should care more for them. For example, providing a more affordable retirement for our seniors. And including our youth, we should providing more opportunity so that they can grow their experience to enter into their career path and help with our growth of the economy. That is why I feel like there's many parts of our platform, the Liberal platform that was released on September 1st. I highly encourage everyone to go read it. It's under liberal.ca/platform. I feel out of all the platform from different parties, the Liberal platform really defined itself. It's a very comprehensive plan with cost analysis and a real plan to bring all Canadians moving forward. And apart from that, I feel if I have the opportunity to be elected, there's more work to be done, and it's not the only issues that I mentioned above.
He is running for Liberal seat, I should say Liberal candidate he is Wilson Meow from the Richmond Centre. We thank you for coming in. We know how
Thank you.
busy and everything everybody is right now.
Yes.
Thank you, Wilson.
Thank you very much.
Our next candidate to join us in the Richmond Centre riding is Sandra Nixon. She is NDP candidate here. And welcome, Sandra.
Thank you very much.
Same three questions for everybody. First question for you. Tell our readers, our viewers, a bit about yourself.
Great, thank you. Well, I'm originally from the prairies. I moved to the West Coast about 30 years ago now. I've been living and raising a family in Richmond for the past 20 years. I wear a number of hats and have a number of roles. I'm a United Church of Canada minister. I've been an ordained minister for the past 15 years and have been with a social justice focused congregation for the past 11 years. I've also am a school trustee here in Richmond, in the Richmond Board of Education, and this is my second term as a trustee. I am also, a couple things I would maybe like folks to know about
Sure.
me. I am a housing co-op member and a housing advocate. I also am an EV, that's electric vehicle owner, and an EV advocate. And finally, not last but not least, I am a parent of two wonderful kids who are feeling some angst about
Sure.
making their way into the world as young adults in light of this pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Well, you talked a bit about your history, but often I find that this history ties in with why you're running, and we'll get to the issues after that. But let's talk a bit about why you were running for MP in this election.
Absolutely. So I think that the past 18 months, as we've gone through the pandemic, have really confronted us with a number of critical issues, which these are issues that aren't new, but I think we've been experiencing much more directly as we've experienced this pandemic, something we've never gone through before. And a number of things that have come to light, things like our climate emergency. I think we all saw this summer, we were faced directly with some of the impacts of that. The fact that it's real and happening now, and the effects of global warming aren't something that we need to worry about or leave to another generation to worry about. That's front and center. And a number of other issues such as racism in our community, in our society, affordability, and I have a number of conversations about that. And so we're needing to talk about these issues, and we're needing to really prioritize, I think, the well-being of people and our planet. And I don't see that this has been the priority of the government till now. I think we need people in Parliament who are going to speak up and show up for these concerns, for the way that this is impacting people in Richmond. And I want to lend my voice to that and do what I can to make sure that these priorities are the ones that government's taking serious action on.
Last question, and you've answered part of it talking about climate change. For Richmond and your specific riding, but the city as a whole, can you talk a bit about some of the other issues that are important to you, issues that need to be addressed by this ever-growing city?
Absolutely. So during this campaign, I've been door knocking, and a couple of conversations are really sticking with me. One is a young woman who told me that she is crashing with friends right now and waiting. She's on a wait list for housing, for co-op housing, and that's probably going to be a couple of years. And her parents, she said, are living out of their van. That really hit me. And another a parent reached out to me, told me they're in one of the few affordable rental complexes here in Richmond right now with her and her family, and that complex is going to be redeveloped next year. They're going to have to find other housing, maybe uproot from where her kids are going to school, because all of the housing that's around them is at least $1,000 more a month than they're currently paying. And so housing and affordability in general is what I'm hearing the most about. Concerns for people wanting to be able to stay in the community they've either grown up in or they currently live in and or work in, and housing is out of reach for people, even rental housing, good quality rental housing. The NDP plan to address housing and affordability in general, so people aren't choosing between paying for decent housing and paying for prescriptions, paying for a cell phone bill, paying for to see a dentist. So these are the kinds of things that are really on people's minds right now, as well as I think job security and being able to be able to take time off when they're sick and need the time off. So that all goes to being able to see some hope and being able to build a feeling like you are able to have the opportunities to build a good life for yourself. And we need to be offering the supports for people in order for them to have that hope. Some of the platform that the NDP some of the commitments they're making, 500,000 units of affordable housing, that's non-market, co-op, other kinds of housing over 10 years. That's absolutely doable. And a couple of the strategies that I'm really in favor of, repurposing land that the federal government already has, working with community partners like school districts, like churches, with community groups who are really invested in creating affordable housing for their community rather than profit being their bottom line and being their priority. And there are ways to incentivize that, provide funds and expertise for community groups to take this on. That's a big piece, along with addressing things like supply and prices through tackling speculation, and also for purchasing, helping folks with mortgage by offering a longer mortgage term, 30-year mortgage terms, strategies like that. So these are absolutely doable, and we can do this and fund this when we stop funding fossil fuel subsidies, and also to banks as well. So we can divert those funds to this and to climate strategies, which, as you mentioned, is the other absolute imperative that we need to be taking much more determined action on.
She is the NDP candidate for Richmond Centre, Sandra Nixon. Thank you for joining us. I know it's a busy time for everybody right now. We appreciate you coming in to talk to us.
It's my pleasure to come in. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Well, continuing with our Richmond Centre riding and the candidates, joining us right now is Laura Gallanders. She's representing the Green Party. Laura, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
You're quite welcome. Okay, same questions for everybody as we've been saying throughout the day. Let's start with a little background introduction to you for our readers/viewers.
Certainly, I am a Richmond resident. I'm a mother. I have 2 sons of my own and 2 stepsons who are older and live with us still. And I've been in Richmond for 16 years. My grandparents were immigrant farmers that came to Richmond in 1953 from Austria, and then they moved, and I grew up in Vancouver, but I came back to Richmond in 2006, and I'm actively involved in the community, and I just love Richmond.
Well, let's talk a bit about your activity in Richmond and what you support. I mean, part of the thing we're asking people today, of course, is why you are choosing to run for MP.
Well, it wouldn't be my first choice to have an election right now. I would have preferred to enjoy the rest of the summer with my kids and get ready to go back to school. I felt it was important for democracy to run in this election. I've always known I would get involved in politics at some point. I was involved in a really largely publicized battle with the city of Richmond over the massive house sizes on farmland. And I worked on that for 2 years until we finally succeeded and managed to get that problem under control. And since then, I was always prompted to stand up and use my voice and keep doing what's right for Richmond. It just seemed like it seemed like a good opportunity to get the message out there that none of the other parties are doing enough for climate change and climate action, and to have that be the focus.
Certainly, climate change has been one of the issues that has come up throughout the day for me and talking to candidates such as yourself. Can you talk a bit about, of course you mentioned climate change, but talk about other issues in Richmond, specifically your riding, but also the city as a whole. Of course, it's ever growing. What are the main concerns for you right now as a candidate, and what you'd like to put your attentions toward as an MP?
Certainly. Well, housing is a huge issue. In Richmond, the prices are out of control. We have a limited amount of land base that we can expand onto. A lot of our single-family neighborhoods are being occupied by large homes that are empty, so all of that space is being taken up. All the new developments are condo developments, which are mostly for investors.
Right.
Some of them are good for people to get into the market, for sure, but what we're really lacking is a lot of affordable family housing, so rental housing, market rental housing. You know, we need places for people to live. Like I said, I have 4 kids living with us in a small home, and one of them's 24, and he doesn't see where he can afford to move in Richmond, even though he makes good money where he's working, and he's a university graduate. So we really need to move forward on housing, and we can get more into that later and throughout the campaign. But so housing and climate change. Especially being in Richmond on a floodplain, we're very vulnerable to the sea level rise that we're going to be experiencing. We have so much to protect with the Fraser River, with our migratory birds that use the estuaries, and so we're vulnerable to further industrialization of the Fraser River. The things that we have to do to mitigate climate change in Richmond, such as raising up our dikes, causes us to clear cut large amount of trees. Right. So we're losing a lot of biodiversity and things that make it really special in Richmond. So climate change and housing are my 2 main issues.
Well, listen, we want to thank you for coming in today. It's a very busy time for all of you right now, so we appreciate the minutes you come in here to talk to the Richmond Sentinel and our viewers and our readers. It's Laura Gallanders. She is the Green Party candidate in Richmond Centre. Laura, thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Well, we're back here to wrap things up where we started, here at the Richmond Sentinel offices in the studio. I've enjoyed talking to the candidates as they want to make their way to Ottawa to represent you, the citizens of Richmond. We hope this has been a valuable tool for you to understand who they are and what's important to them. Don't forget, more information on the election and everything else that's Richmond in terms of news and stories, richmondsentinel.ca. Thank you for joining us. Thanks to Takuya, thanks to Florence, and thank you again for watching. I'm Jim Gordon.